Okay, so how do you build a totally new kind of state, right from scratch? For Vladimir Lenin, the answer wasn't about laws or elections. No, his blueprint was based on something, well, something a lot more primal. Let's dive in.
And really, Lenin's whole idea of what a state should be, it can pretty much be summed up by this one incredibly blunt sentence. This isn't just some catchy phrase, you guys. This is the absolute key, the thing that unlocks everything that came next. When you hear a phrase like dictatorship of the proletariat, it's easy to dismiss it as, I don't know, just political jargon, right? A slogan. But for Lenin, oh no, he meant it literally. He believed the state's power didn't come from laws or from votes or any kind of constitution. It came directly from force, from violence, with absolutely nothing holding it back. Right, so this wasn't just some abstract idea meant for dusty textbooks or university debates. Not at all. This was a doctrine, a hands-on, concrete plan for taking power and completely reshaping a country. And just stop and think about what that really means for a second. If violence is the only thing that makes your rule legitimate, then all the old ways of doing things, they gotta go. Parliaments, courts, elections, suddenly they're not just irrelevant, they're actual roadblocks that need to be torn down. We're not talking about a renovation here. This was a complete demolition job. So that really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, it's one thing to have this radical idea on paper, but it's a whole other challenge to actually build a state on that foundation. How do you take that philosophy and turn it into real, practical, boots-on-the-ground power?
Well, an idea this extreme, it's going to need some very specific and, let's be honest, very brutal tools to make it a reality. You can't just wish it into existence. You have to build a whole new machine for control.
Yeah, the old ways of doing things, the police, the courts, the bureaucracy, they were completely useless for this kind of project. In fact, they were seen as part of the very system that had to be destroyed. You needed something brand new. New organizations designed for one single purpose: to enforce power through violence. And it really boiled down to two main instruments, both of which became pretty infamous for their brutal efficiency. You had the Red Terror, and you had the relentless political purchase. Think of them as the twin engines that powered this new state. So let's start with the Red Terror. The easiest way to think about it is like the state's clenched fist, just striking out at society. This was a huge public campaign of violence. The point wasn't just to punish enemies, it was to terrorize and frankly wipe out entire groups of people. It was all about crushing any possible opposition that was outside the party. Okay, but what about threats coming from the inside? That's where the purges came in. This was the state basically turning its weapons on itself. It was a systematic cleansing, if you will, of the party, the military, the government, all to guarantee absolute 100% loyalty. It was about making sure the revolution didn't devour itself by, devouring the questionable parts first.
And the thing that's so important to get here is that this wasn't just random chaos. It was the exact opposite. The terror and the purges, they were both cold, calculated, and incredibly methodical. It's like they were two blades of the same pair of scissors working together to cut away everything that stood in the way of one single political goal.
Okay, so we've got the philosophy, right? And we've got the tools they used to enforce it. But what was the point of it all? What was the endgame? What kind of foundation were they trying to build with all this violence? Well, think about it. When you systematically crush all your external enemies with something like the Red Terror, and then you systematically get rid of any dissent inside your own group with purges, you're not just winning a fight. You are fundamentally changing the entire political landscape. You're clearing the land, so to speak, to build something totally new. And what's the logical result of all that? It's kind of inevitable, really. When you violently erase every single political alternative, every opponent, every person who disagrees, every potential rival, what are you left with? Only one party, one source of power, one single undisputed will. So let's just quickly retrace that path. Step 1, you start with the idea that all power comes from violence. Step 2, you put that idea into practice using terror and purges. What happens next? All other political options are gone, wiped off the map. And what you're left with is the foundation for a single-party state. You can draw a straight, unbroken line from the starting idea to the final result. And this, right here, might be the single most important takeaway. The one-party state, it wasn't some kind of accident. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a temporary thing that just got out of control. Nope. It was the cold, hard, logical endpoint of that very first idea, that real power is only won and kept through violence. The destination was basically built into the roadmap from the very start.
Which kind of leaves us with a pretty big, heavy question, doesn't it? If a state is literally born from violence, what happens when the violence slows down? Once the most obvious terror and killing stops, what's left to hold it all together? What does a state that was built on pure force rely on when it starts to put the guns away? That's definitely something to think about.